All right.
Yeah, I just started a recording. So if we want to maybe just do that, and I'll just upload it like I did last time to uh, Google Drive, and then you can upload it to the YouTube.
Yep. All
Okay.
right. So this is the technical committee meeting for April the 8th. We have with us myself and Wes from the technical committee, and a multitude of our triagers here as panelists. This meeting is going to be a little bit of a different makeup than previous ones, as we are trying out joining a triage discussion into the meeting. We may or may not split this out to a separate meeting, but we're just going to see how this goes as we've grown our triage group. I know a lot of various triaging questions have been arising. I know, and we're looking to have a forum to discuss whatever issues the triagers are having or questions that they have that have come up, like how to do XYZ. I know we had even a suggestion for presenting some findings from the triagers. So that I know was a big topic there. And I don't know, in your thoughts on this, Wes, if we should actually start with that, as in, because we can always probably stop that early or see where that goes, or which one do we want to do that first? Because I know people really want that. Or
yeah, I'd like to hear from the other folks, but I will say it seems like the first two issues that are listed on the agenda might be rather quick. Like I assume that security update is
correct.
What we're talking about with the cookie thing, and the other one, since we have done a few deep dives into Express 5 progress, maybe we could just quickly go over that and then go into the triage for the remaining time. That would work for me. I don't know how other folks feel.
Nope, that's what I figured. I just wanted to check. So let's just do that real quick here. All right. So just as an update for what was at the top of the agenda last time, as typically making sure our users stay secure is one of our, always our top of mind. One of the modules in the Pillar.js organization, HBS, that is a view engine for handlebars. It was getting essentially a very nonsense report from NPM audit and those type of tools. Unfortunately, things around there were stagnant for a long time, and now when there's an update, there's been a lot of ripple through the Node.js community, and that's where we ended up, inside the ripple at least. But I was able to work on pull requests and stuff with the handlebars.js team to get a backport of the handlebars things that we need and that work with our requirements there, and we got that published and out. To give some specific context, handlebars actually is kind of like handlebars project right now is in a weird state where they have progress towards a new major, and of course, and this happened, and they didn't want to necessarily put this as a new major, but then they ended up unfortunately breaking some of the behavior in the older version. But I helped them resolve that and get a new version released. And that project is also, looks like it's in the transition of being handed off between some new owners and old owners. I don't know exactly, but that added some extra little complication to it. But that is resolved. Another one reported, from discussion. So we talk about here is the cookie-parser module. The security report was basically that since it does a few different things, and one of the things it does is it supports basically a JSON value cookie. That's where you can basically say, here's a cookie that has a JSON value, and it would actually say res.cookies dot the cookie name, and it would be whatever that JSON value is. There's potential there for, effectively what they would say type confusion, where one might use cookie parser and then one might construct their application in such a way where they expect res.cookies dot some name to result in something basic like a string or undefined. But with this, it can result in a object, for example, and then if they then proceed to pass that to another library, this is what they use in their example, that has different behavior based on the type of value it's given, the client could execute behavior that the application did not expect to occur. So as you see, it requires a lot of specific setup. So we feel like that it's at max. It seems like if it even is a security issue with the module, which at least I don't feel like it's truly a security module in the sense of CVEs with the module. It would certainly be a low one because there's no actual exploit in the module in any way. It's just confusion for how these things, when you piece a lot of systems together and piecing them together in weird ways. But in the vein of trying to make for sure that the what you'd call secure by better secure defaults, is we will be releasing a version here that not only allows you to turn that feature on and off, but then we'll follow it up with a major version that it defaults to off. So basically users would have to opt into that feature if they so desire. So it's kind of like the updates on that right there. Sorry.
I was wondering with that. So in general, I think that's just we're handling it. That's the correct way forward and whatnot. If they were to open a CVE, which I imagine a aggressive security person might go ahead and do just upon hearing this, even though that is maybe not true or valid, but that doesn't stop them. As we've seen in the past, aka Minimist. I'm wondering if there's anything we could do, could we prioritize that next major and get that out relatively soon? I know in the one thread you were saying, maybe we only do the give them the ability to turn it off, but not necessarily change the default yet. I'm just wondering, it rather than leave ourselves open to them opening this aggressive and possibly invalid CVE and then us having to deal with the user complaints, would it be better to just go ahead and do that this week, just to make sure that we're ahead of the curve?
Yeah. So, and the real reason I hesitated it was because just in the past, there's been a couple cases in the past where doing that has actually been used as a validation that it was truly a security issue, if that makes sense. I mean, it's trivial for us to just plop out a new major if that does become an actual thing. I think we should plop out a new major. I think that there are some things that we should probably look into, for example, this cookie signature module is way out of date on there because they randomly dropped a node version inside of a minor instead of keeping it backwards compatible and blah blah blah, and rejected my pull request to actually undo that a long time ago.
And that seems like grounds for us forking and swapping.
Yeah, right? I've thought about just inlining the little bit of logic at that point because it's not that much. The other reason is because I would like to have us at least have a breathing room to kind of at least, not that it would prevent it, but to discuss probably a longer term cookie strategy. Partly about what Wes has proposed with this talking about node core, and also potentially whether or not Express itself should not this is not part of 5 effort, just to be clear. But just it's just a roadmap item to think about, like, yeah, like should Express, like you can set cookies by the, you can set cookies out of the box, but you can't read them, which seems kind of odd. Uh,
Yeah,
the
great.
other, yeah, and the other question is that I forgot to put in there. The thing is, like, should we almost even like restrict the JSON ability to like signed cookies, which would have just been, not a problem at this point, right? Because only server side can set signed cookies is the purpose of signed cookies. So
I mean, I think there's validity, I think, to supporting it in unsigned. So, okay, maybe not. Is there a reason to do unsigned cookies? So the reason to do an unsigned cookie would be that you are going to use it in the browser for some other process. So,
I mean,
that means that JSON there would be valid, I think, because then you would use the same logic on the front end to then say, oh, this is a JSON value, process it as JSON, right?
Right. I mean, the purpose of the signed versus unsigned is, like, ideally they should always be signed, but especially if you're talking about like communications between, maybe you have a Node app that sets a cookie on the same domain, you might have some legacy app, you might just need to be able to either, set it in a way that legacy app expects. Maybe it has a signature algorithm that's different or some other such. So that's part of the reason why the unsigned exists. Plus, there's a lot of cookies you might want to read, like tracking cookies and stuff that's just unrelated. Because remember, this is the cookie parser as well. It doesn't have anything to do with writing cookies, and that's actually kind of, when I thought about it, really annoying, because talking about how you set cookies and how you read the cookies and them being like in completely separate spaces kind of, ends up where it's like they both have to agree, for example, on what a signed or unsigned cookie even looks like.
Yeah, I think this is the strongest argument to me that has been made to moving it just straight up into a default included Express feature and have the both ends of it in, the same implementation space. Like if that's one module that does both, or, something a little bit more streamlined than we have today. That is the strongest argument there to me for that approach.
Yep. And this is all just to noodle on, just to be clear to everyone, especially if everyone is thinking like that, anybody's questioning whether or not we're talking about putting this into 5. This is more like just a general topic that just came to light with the report in my mind, just to think about. So the same thing actually happened with I forget who put it. Oh yeah, so it was John who opened a PR against Express async errors, but like apparently we overlooked like adding promise support to the parm helper, and so I realized like a question is, should we actually add promise support to that or not? Because that was like, if we did that, that module almost becomes completely obsolete, and we basically encompass that module in core. Without it, I think that the module author I saw was arguing like, there's still stuff this module does that's not in Express 5, which does seem kind of odd, but that's something else to noodle on for us.
I can speak to that specific issue later too. I posted a comment about it, but yeah. And specifically with that, that's something we can add, and that doesn't have to be a major though, because it would still be backwards compatible.
Yeah, ideally. The sooner we can add it, the better. What I mean by that is because adding the promise support to the router itself is technically backwards compatible, except there's a lot of people. Someone just opened up an issue in Express just recently. I think it was maybe today or yesterday, where literally they're returning something from their middleware, but middlewares don't take returns. And so there's been cases where people are returning promises and not realizing it. And then suddenly their router behavior changes when you start treating it differently. The reason I say sooner or later, because this technically is backwards compatible. The only reason we kicked that to 5 is because it had a lot of potential to break existing apps. But if you put it, early on in the life cycle of stuff, I mean, that gap is a lot smaller, because like, well, if you're already using the router 2, for example, that just came out, say, 3 months ago, then, it's much less likely we're going to have a large user base who is going to like have any like real regressions from such a thing. Because it is technically a new feature for sure. So that's why I'm not saying to worry about it at this point. Just it is something we should probably do at some point, even if that is just 2.1.0 or whatever we want. So part of my conversation is like I was just using it as an example for like what came to light when there was an issue talked about, just to think on. Part of it is I really like how you went and made that PR to them, and that brought that to light on a miss, because I didn't even realize that. I totally forgot about that when I saw them, like, oh yeah, it's right. But yes.
So can I ask, for the cookie issue, would next steps be possibly discussing this first in the forum of the Web Server Frameworks team, so that we can see if there's some alignment between. So one of the things that came up in the last meeting when I brought this up, and I'm not sure who all was there from this group, but there was some question on Node Core taking on more of these APIs. One of the issues is the bandwidth constraints. So the HTTP team has hesitated to do this because they're like, well, we have enough to maintain. We need other people. We need other people to help us maintain this if we're going to take on any more. So it's not that anybody said, oh, we don't think this is a good idea. It's just a matter of who's going to maintain it. So if we wanted to get a group together of people from the Web Server Frameworks team to maintain it, I think it would be really feasible for us to get a new cookie API inside Core, commit to maintaining that via the Web Server Frameworks team, and then build a better cookie strategy into Express on top of that for probably V6. Does that, like, as a general strategy, sound like a good path forward?
Yep, I think that is a great long-term like path forward for all this. That's why, especially when you started that group, was awesome, because I know that that's like can be an argument they have, but like if you think about Express, right? I'm sure you know this already, Wes, is like it's very tied to the Node Core implementation.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is it's just it's a really thin layer on top compared to some of the other frameworks. And perhaps, especially if they're saying if there is a void in those groups, like, it could be very beneficial to both sides, us and them, to help fill such void, because, that really does say like, oh, this core part of how Express and this API works, is from Node Core. So, why not start enhancing that directly, if that makes sense?
Yeah, and I think we can make a pretty strong argument for some of these things that are just so basic to these protocols. I think cookies are one really good example, but I think we can pull a few more from our JS HTTP layers. And if nothing else, it just gets more eyes on the problem, right? Because today there's only a few people watching each of those repos, and having that in Node Core, I think will just, like you said, benefit everyone. It'll get our eyes over there and their eyes on our stuff, sort of in air quotes there, but like, it will be Node Core feature from then on out. Okay. Yeah. So if you like that, then, so that was already going to be on the agenda for the next meeting, which I believe is a early one next week. So if anybody from here can make that, so that we can have and continue that discussion, that would be super helpful. If not, I will also post a link to the issue that I raised over on that repo so people can comment.
Yeah, and one final thing to add to that as well is that I believe that was a thing that you had brought up before as well, about like the JS HTTP in relation to the Web Frameworks group, and like having like a quote unquote dubbed, implementation, is that really ultimately, I think whatever the dubbed implementation is, probably would end up really ultimately being the most successful by just being in Core. If you look at streams most recently, there was like, I think like at least two different modules that got embedded into core, right? So there was like pipeline module, if you remember seeing that stuff, and another one too.
Was
Forget
it
the name.
Pump?
Pump, yes, that's
Yeah.
another one. And I think that actually went way further than I could have ever imagined, because like I think that did more good for all of that than if they just like moved those modules into the Node organization and said, oh yeah, there are Node official modules. They'd probably just be exactly the same as they would have otherwise at that point.
I totally agree. I think like RimRaf or whatever and MakeDerp are exactly the same. It's like these are things that are just so fundamental. It doesn't make any sense not to move them into core as long as there's somebody who's willing to stand up and help maintain them. And for these ones, I think, again, we get a benefit out of moving that into Node Core. So I don't see any reason why, I'm definitely available to help maintain those, whatever that means. I mean, to be honest, a lot of it'll just be copy and paste some of this code into core. Like, it's not like we have to come up with new paradigms here. We have really great functional code.
Yeah, and that's what happened with like those modules. They copy and pasted into core at first, and there was then a bunch of tweaks after it. I'm sure probably similar things would happen too. And like I said, so yeah, and all this is part of the long-term strategy for Express itself, because like I said, we're web. These all are things that we need, and having them in core, I think can help not a lot with just increasing the foundation that we're built upon by having it under like that much more eyes. Because once, say like a cookies read and write is in core, then it would be inevitable that definitely all of the other web frameworks would be using the same cookie rewrite foundation, and therefore they would all have their eyes on it, find bugs, edge cases, fix them, etc., and then would all benefit each other. With the modules we have today, that was like the tall order, and it didn't go very far, because the different frameworks have different priorities, including at least one of them I know a priority, which makes sense to them, and I'm not like there's nothing wrong with it. It's just their priority is that it's either Node Core or code that they wrote, and that it is what it is. And so Node Core in this case would be the way to go to get them on board too. And like I said, we would use it too, so it's not like I think it's better overall. Yeah, so
great. Okay, so I'll make sure that conversation gets moving forward in that group over there. So maybe we can move on to the update, so we don't spend too much time on non-triage stuff.
Yep. No, yeah, and so it was nice. I was actually going to comment that was like, especially talking about the long term, was definitely a very TC technical committee type of subject to talk on this meeting, to put out there for everybody to think about. Otherwise, moving on to updates. So since the last meeting, of course, we talked about the code of conduct. So as you probably saw, that is all in there now, merged and everything. So from that, I opened an issue that I realized, like, from the website to do automated. I know, Wes, you commented on that. We don't need to talk about the specifics there, but like the idea is that we'll also get that code of conduct mirrored up onto the express.js.com website, just like the rest of the things. So we have the charter. So if you probably saw, Wes, I was pushing some commits to that. Those were stuff that was opened up as part of OpenJS. I did a few things.
Picking that up. I just haven't had a chance to finish the work. So it's great that you picked that up.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep. I wrapped some stuff, and I was actually just going to try to fill in a couple things, and then we'll get that in there as well. So we'll satisfy the OpenJS's need there for those.
Is there a PR open for that? The code of conduct?
The code of conduct has already been merged, so it doesn't have a PR open any longer. But the charter does have a pull request open.
I linked the code of conduct PR that has been merged in there, and I'm pretty sure what we did. And Doug, I don't know for sure what your changes were, but I think where it started was just copy in the contributor covenant, which there was some discussion in the OpenJS Foundation, and I think they landed on that you have to have the full content in there, which is why this is
Yep.
what it is. So.
Yep. So that's pretty much where it is. Full content's in there. The links that you had, they removed the .html from working at all. So I had to fix those links to remove those so they would actually go to the actual code. And then we made that we got that report email address made and in there. And then the wording changes that OpenJS wanted for that. And that pretty much is a summary of the changes since it seemed like everything else was all agreed upon. And yeah, it's just it's basic. The whole thing is a copy of that with the new reporting email address.
And then I linked the charter PR in here as well for anybody who wants to read it. Now that you've pushed, I think you've pushed a little bit to this, right, Doug?
Yep.
Yeah. So I'll take a quick look, but I don't.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Right?
We have like the few sections intentionally left blank. I'm sure we could probably add some more to it, but as I was reading through it when I was doing that, I'm pretty sure as it is, because the only other comment was just the difference between the charter doc and the what's it called, contributing
governance.
Right. And basically like rectifying them, but then as we discussed in there, like from what you said, is we'll just follow it up at some point to kind of like consolidate them. And so most likely it would be consolidating in our, contributing governance into the charter as, whatever stuff that the charter has in it that would be a duplicate otherwise. But we will do that as a follow-up and not part of this pull request itself.
Yeah, and these are living things too. We can always make changes
Right.
to them whenever. I think it just technically once we merge it, after that we have to like agree or vote or something. I don't know. There's some language about that, I thought. But.
Right. Yep. So that's like the little piece that we have to make sure that we get done there. And I think that just as part of that too, like I think that sums up the remaining stuff that was on the list for OpenJS Foundation, I believe. Is that right? To your knowledge, Wes?
Yeah, I think we're good after that. I think, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure that's pretty much all that was the last pieces of it. So, and then, well, the last doc related thing is the what's it called? It's escaping my mind looking through it right now. Project captains, that's it. And so we'll get that here merged tonight. Because as far as I can tell, I was just double checking it earlier today, is that it's just as we discussed and everything. So we will merge that, which will then lead to all the rest of everything. So I'm I wanted to say that before I pushed up any commit that squashed everything together, because I know the last time I pushed a commit up, like the question was, well, why am I pushing a commit up? So I'll push the commit up to squash it, and that's the only changes it will be, is just to squash them. Once the build runs and passes, it'll be merged in as well, just to make sure we're all on the same page on that.
I can squash if you want from my side.
Gotcha. So if you squash it, just make for sure that the committer is set to my name, so that way when it merges, it shows who was the person who did the merge. And then make sure that it references the number of the pull request to close and all that stuff. It kind of like just like what was normally like part of the mergers process inside of the landing doc.
Okay.
And then I can merge it if they're, otherwise I'll have to still edit. I'll still have to amend it anyways, otherwise, if they're not there.
So basically what you're saying is if I squash and append the meta tag in the commit message with your name, you can just use the GitHub's button to merge it. Otherwise, you will need to use the CLI to edit the message and add that. Is that how it is?
Yeah, so like the actual, git commit has like two authors, like has an author and a committer.
Yeah.
So typically that's why, when if you look at the merges, like it will say Wesley, Todd, and Douglas Wilson code of contact on the top. So to get both the names up there, it's that typically the author is on there, and then the person who did the merge will be the committer on the actual git commit object itself. It's not part of the message. It's just part of the commit object. Does that make sense?
Yep. Got it.
And then usually, just like if you look at that commit message, there'll be the closes and a number, and that's for the pull request. So that way it definitely, that gives us our back ref to it. And then, yeah, once it's like that, the UI or CLI both will merge it because it's just the same at that point, because just a fast forward.
Yep.
But yeah, cool. All right. I know that we only really have 15 more minutes left for triage at this point. And so I'm sure that there are some questions that we definitely probably want to make sure that we hit before we get too long, before we go too far over. I know my suggestion was to make it 50-50. I know we went over 50% of the first part. So unless we,
I know
stuff we need to talk about.
You mentioned you had did you say you had an update on something that you said would be like a 2-minute thing? Maybe that would be a good place to start here.
Yeah, I did. So good evening, everyone, and welcome David Ash, a new triager who's just joined. Yay, consumer team. We'll tell you who they are another day. So I've been looking at the Express session module, and obviously when you first look at it, you think, well, that's a cutesy little small thing that couldn't possibly be complicated. And after about 10 minutes, you reassess the situation. And to that end, I've been going through it. It's easy to go through the code, but actually to look at every single scenario is quite hard. So I've actually gone through nearly finished all 2,500 lines of unit tests, going through every single one. There are several that actually pass that shouldn't and need some slight adjustment. They're always funny when you find them because they've been there for years. Like, why has nobody noticed that? But not many. But the fact that I've found them is proof that I've actually gone through every single one now. I've actually also raised an issue via the package maintenance committee, which I'm just going to put in here, which you're kind of going to get for dependents. There is no API, and this will help other maintainers, meaning people that we're a dependency of. We have no way of knowing who is using us. And for the Express session, you have various things, Mongo, Redis, and it would be good to have an API that says, these people use us big time, and we don't even know about them. Perhaps I should test with that particular database, yeah? Otherwise, I'll stick to the ones that I've heard of, which is kind of what I'm doing now with like Redis and Mongo, using those as stores. That's something I'm also working on. Once I have all the PRs raised to unit tests and they have been landed and accepted, if we do think they are right and proper, which I think we will do. Some of them made me laugh. I think it would be a good idea actually to break out the unit tests. We've actually discussed that in other meeting. You mentioned it, Doug, into smaller things, because it is quite a bite, the 2,500 lines, and they do break down very well because I have nice described blocks. I think updating the readmes would help. And then I think what I'd be doing is start taking some of the existing PRs I've already looked at that have been raised to other people. But I'm going to be humble and try and get the things that don't change the code done first, unit tests, try and get this API done through the NPM folks, and Rui there has raised an RFC for it. And if we could comment on that, that would actually help, because I think there's just a couple of people. Wes, I don't know if you've got time to talk about that, because in the first half hour of the package maintenance meeting, I had to leave after the first half hour for another work meeting.
So we did
and I
chat a
think
little.
that's a very useful.
But we did chat a little bit
good.
about it, but I think the more effective thing would be for folks to attend the NPM RFC meeting next Wednesday, if they can. So this has the agenda label, and so it will be talked about at that RFC meeting, because no matter what we talk about on the package maintenance team, unless they implement it on the registry or via the CLI somehow, it's not going to get done. Right? So the NPM RFC meeting is the end all of that particular discussion.
Is there a link to the Zoom on that? Is that on the Node calendar, or where is that? I don't actually know where that one is.
That is in the NPM calendar. So let me grab a link. They may not have made the issue yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we just had the.
They've got an issue.
We had the deep dive meeting this morning.
We had a 125. Okay. So I have a plan for Express session. I'm going to start doing it. I think I started off in the correct way. Let's be humble. Yeah. And the more I looked at it, I realized perhaps I hadn't been using it correctly in the past. And found a few things that made myself blush, and my usage of all the different parts in there. So I think I have a good plan for going forward with that. And I'll be raising some PRs very soon. I took it slowly rather than just rushing in, raising PRs. I think we want to see some people with some real commitment to looking after things, and I think that's the approach I'm going to take.
Sweet, yeah. Those are like, and the Express session one is definitely one of the. If you were to say like, what are the pillars of like the organization for like usage, like Express session is probably number like 2, 3, or 4 up in there. I'm assuming Express is 1 just because it's a prereq, really. It is definitely way up there in usage, and you can probably see it. And like, and it's complex, not only in like, just as you saw the code, but just in its usage. So that's why it's also a larger support burden one as well. And I've seen things where they burn out, like Passport is a good example of, it's like a really big project, but I just see like the endless stream of everybody asking questions in there. Express session is a little lower level, so it doesn't get that, but it still does get a lot of like questions, and they're deep and sometimes complex questions, and so it does have a very large burden compared to the others, and it's a complex module that requires really like fuller attention than we've honestly given it. So it's awesome that if we can really like spin that into something like super awesome, like on the level of.
I have questions.
It's definitely a project.
Get to you sometime. Yeah, I have said there's 1 or 2 things, and I said why. There's always some whys. I know there must be a reason why, because it's there, and I can see it's been put in there deliberately. But we'll get to that. But yeah, as you say, one of the things is I'm not sure. I will test it when I test things actually in reality using different stores. I'm not so sure how many stores there are and what the use cases are apart from the obvious ones. There are numbers listed in there with slow down loads in the README that perhaps shouldn't be there. And that's one of the areas, the third-party things we should remove. I had a different opinion when I first started than I do now, and I don't think they should be there.
Yep.
Glenn, real quick. So thanks for the update on that. Is there anything you need or anything you want? Do you want help from anybody while you're going about doing your stuff, or do you need eyes on anything right now or in the future?
In a week or so, and I will have some questions for Doug. There's just a couple of things in there that I will need, like the why on wrap methods. So if you're smiling, I can see the wrap methods call twice. The recursive call got me a bit, but apart from that, I'm good. And I will be starting to raise PRs in place before I break out the tests. So we have the least possible movement at any one time. And that's my update.
I want to slip in real quick. I noticed this. I wanted to ask, do we have David set up? I saw his PR came in a while ago to become a triager. He's here now. He said hi. Is he set up? Does he have
Probably
triage
not.
permission and all that?
So so I'm the bottleneck here, and I need to unblock y'all on this. How would we like to do this? Is there somebody who wants to maybe be the triage team captain and I don't know what permissions we need to add to make it so that they can add people to the team. My place blocking this is very unfortunate, and I'm sorry to everyone who I haven't added. I just want to see what we could do to unblock that. Like, do we know, does somebody have to be an owner in order to add people to teams? Like, how does that work?
I'd assume it's probably write permission on the repo or something. I don't actually know though.
Yeah, you're talking about in GitHub itself, right?
Yeah.
I don't 100% know. They've added so many roles. I wonder if I can just see what these roles are and at all. Let's see. Hold on real quick. Change role on someone. Oh, just member owner. Where is it that you see?
Oh, maintainer right here. Oh, I've got it. Okay.
Cool.
Does anybody, are we comfortable adding? So the maintainer description here says that a team maintainer can add and remove team members and create child teams.
Nice.
So is there anybody who wants to be a triage team maintainer? So what this would mean would be that I will add you as a maintainer on all 3 teams, the 3 organizations triage team member, and then you will be able to do the full management of adding new people. So like, you'll be able to go and grant them the triage role. And then that'll also mean, I think, you'll need to be able to merge those PRs. So that does probably mean merge on the Express repo. I'm not sure. Or maybe even just having them added as the role is all we need for now. And that would be enough.
Adding the role
I
would probably
can
block.
attempt that probably, yeah, with John. We two can.
I was gonna say I'm happy to do it, but also Garesh kicked a bunch of this stuff off, so I'd see him as a good candidate for that kind of stuff if he's interested in it.
Yeah, I suggest we do that because based on availability, understanding, and time zone, all these things matter. So we two running that is really good.
Okay, so we're comfortable with adding both Suresh and John as maintainers of the triage team?
Seems a good idea.
Okay.
I think David's putting his thumb up, but he's in Brooklyn, so his camera doesn't work.
You can't hear my thumb up?
Yeah, I hear your thumbs up.
Okay, so I'm changing those roles right now. If you see anything weird with it, just let us know. It should just work, would be my hope. But if not, we can.
Yeah,
do what we need to do.
Yeah, we'll definitely make sure at least one of you tries to add someone specifically. If we can find if there's someone to add that is not part of the Express org at all, right? That'll tell us like what level that this is actually giving, so we know that they got you actually have the necessary permissions to actually manage it.
Yeah. So yeah, I made both of you maintainers of the team. So I guess maybe we should also document that in. Did we ever merge the triage branch? I don't actually know.
Let me see.
No, we never merged it.
Okay.
Because I know that there was. Because I was going to say, I know that there was the stuff that was editing, and then you were doing some edits but couldn't push it up. So,
well, I did push up my edit.
No, I know. I'm just going back in history, and then I know. So let me commit also John's suggestion here. So John has a suggestion. We can, unless we don't want to commit that. Oh, it looks like I had committed a few other of the suggestions already, as well, onto it. Looks like 11 days ago, I was committing some of John's suggestions here. Other than that, he has a couple more suggestions there, it looks like. But if that all looks good, then we'll also get that all merged in here too, along with all the other doc stuff.
Absolutely. So, and Ryan, you got added, right? Because your PR is still open here. I think.
Yeah, Doug added me.
Okay, cool.
Oh yes, because I believe that's right. Someone, I forget someone pinged me on it, so I just went ahead and
I bugged you enough until you just did it.
It's the way to get things done in open source.
No.
Yeah.
So
I originally saw it, but didn't really do it because it wasn't clear to me, like, who was going to do it. And since there wasn't like a doc to make sure I wasn't going to, do it in some weird way. But I think like, that's why, we'll get like some people who will actually have that as like a, task essentially. And then, they can document it as they would like to document the process. So that way, if they leave or have to onboard other people, we can actually have it documented down, for how to add and remove members. And because that's the other thing I think that we haven't figured out, I think at some point, is what's an offboarding process probably look like for a triager and things.
So just to make a little, I say this and then, it takes me 6 months to actually implement the automation, but I have the start of a team membership management automation GitHub action. It's on the PKGJS org, which is the one that the package maintenance team is going to be managing. I have specifically tried to design it so that it could be used for the triage team, for all of the web server frameworks and package maintenance working groups of the world. So if anybody's interested in finishing up that automation, so basically what it does is it has like a process for people applying. It looks at their PRs and validates the structure of their name addition, and then automatically goes and adds them to the proper teams that you configure it to do. I think most of it is working, and it also has an offboarding thing. So it like looks at anybody who hasn't had activity in 6 months or a year or something. And then if those folks don't, it opens up an issue if they have hit a 6 month mark of no activity. And then it gives them a chance to say like, hey, no, I do want to participate. Sorry, I've been busy. And just that little bit of activity then re-enables, it's like just touching the membership, and then we'll keep them active. So I think there's maybe some pieces just to clean up in there. But then once that's there, we could enable it on the triage team across the orgs. I think would be a pretty nice addition from an automation standpoint.
Yep. Yeah, the only reason I mentioned offboarding on that one is because that's so far out of all the roles that we have, from, committer, TC member, things like that. That's the only one where there's no prior like history of activity required to get that, right? And so I think that has the higher chance of having some churn, people who think that they want to do it. I think you saw that at the when you first started advertising it, that a bunch of people interested, and then there was only certain people who continued to actually go do it. And so that's why offboarding is probably like going to be a much more common thing there at some point. Obviously we don't want anybody to offboard. We really want everybody to participate for sure, but that's what I figure at least. So.
Yep. Totally. And then, so PR is welcome, because as with a lot of these things lately, I've been starting them very effectively and then not finishing them. So please help me finish these projects.
Cool. All right. Well, so also per, I believe, Glenn's request last time, we're pretty much at the mark for the end of the meeting. So I just want to make sure that we don't keep going on and on. I know there's still a lot we didn't get to, and we will make for sure that we get to that. And, so anybody who raised something and they, in this discussion thing and we didn't get to it, post again, so that way I'll make for sure. Obviously you can always wait for the next one to open, but just if you want to post that we didn't get to whatever the thing and you still want to talk about it, I'll make sure that gets moved over as well, for sure, as topics onto the next one, so we don't get them just kind of lost.
So as maybe a quick wrap up topic, well, maybe first, does anybody have anything that's sort of urgent triage topic wise that they'd like to discuss before we close?
If we had that time, I would love to hear Sushmet talk about he had raised wanting to know when to close issues. If we don't have time for that, if people have to go, that's fine. I understand. But that was an important one that I would like us to be able to talk about briefly if anyone has the interest.
Yeah, I would second that.
And I was going to say, would anybody be, so I'll throw something else out there too. Like, would we also be interested in covering some of these rollover topics and maybe in a not next Wednesday meeting, but maybe even like a much closer follow-up meeting, for example? Like, what if we had one like, for example, the one we had like for a while, like the Thursday morning one, would anybody be interested in that as well? I'm not trying to, we can also continue on this meeting too. I just wanted to throw that out there if that would be of interest. I know it's short notice, but.
Are you talking about a one-off, or are you talking about a triage meeting, which we'd mentioned briefly in other places?
Currently, I'm mentioning it as a one-off, but it could certainly become a more regular one if we want to.
So maybe can we, Shmet, can you maybe give us some updates, and then we can just finish with that topic and just try to make it at least a little bit quick? Would that be all right? Just so that we get the more urgent topic covered, and then we can discuss another meeting.
Yeah, sure, Wes. So yeah, my general question was, I was looking at tickets to triage, and then I kind of understood what I had to do for it. And then I looked at John's posting on another ticket, and that made me realize that, there might be instances where I might not have all the context on some things, and I wouldn't be able to give the proper feedback and just understand as to when I can close a ticket. Because after reading John's comments, I was like, okay, this makes sense. We're on the same lane here. This should probably get a label, should probably get closed or wrapped into it. So I'm wondering what are the thoughts on that and how we could be more productive there.
Yeah, you could, so I guess I have two thoughts, right? If you're okay with posting like a question for more context in there, you could certainly do that, even like tagging some other folks at the triager. I believe we have an actual @triage tag, so that you can almost like make it clear you're asking kind of like the general group versus the actual OP. Another thing that I thought about, like I'd mentioned like a long time ago, was like the idea of like, is there a way where you can reach out to like us as a group, but more like privately versus inline? I don't know a good way to do that, but like if we think that that's valuable, we could either almost like just use the current discussions repo for that, or we could even make a special like triager like repo of like triage coordination, if that's useful, that we think of. I'm just throwing some ideas out there.
I really do like so I think we should strike a balance between the public and private. I don't think strictly public or strictly, sorry. Hey, baby. Thank you for joining the meeting. So I think we should err on the side of public where possible. But I know that sometimes it's important to be able to, put yourself out there saying, hey, I don't know what to do here, in a way that is more direct and private. In that regard, I think would be a good idea to open up a private triage repo where only triage and general project members have access for those type of discussions. As long as we are all on the same page that if you feel comfortable posting publicly, that is the preferred method. And the reason I say that is just because it puts the knowledge out there. It makes people aware of the questions anyone might have, right? So if you have that question or are unsure, then that almost guarantees that somebody else does as well, right? And so when you do it in a public manner, somebody else might be able to learn from that experience in a shared fashion. Whereas if they are not comfortable putting themselves forward as a triage team member just yet, they won't have access to the private discussion, right? Which makes the public one just a little bit more valuable. That said, I'm super on board with making a private triage repo for us all to have a place to have those more sensitive, especially if there's, if somebody's coming in and saying, like, being really aggressive or, borderline on the code of conduct, having a private place for that type of thing is very important. So I think that would be a good addition, whether or not we use it actively or not. That's my 2 cents.
So let me jump in real quick. One, what I'm hearing from Sushmet is, which, by the way, Sushmet, I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm very sorry. Am I saying properly Sushmet?
Sushmeet, but yeah, it's
Sushmeet. Okay, Sushmeet.
Yeah,
That's simple. I just wanted to make sure. I'm sorry about that. I apologize. So what I'm hearing from Sushmeet is that you're going through the exact same thing that probably every triager goes through, and I would love to have a place for us to like work with each other and talk about that. So whatever we land on for that, I think that's awesome. We're kind of like the guinea pigs, this first batch of us. So I think there's a whole lot of learning that we can. I'm happy you read my comment. I'm glad that it was beneficial to you. Also, GitHub has this weird feature which Glenn brought my attention to accidentally. There's a whole discussion, like the team. I'll drop a link to it, but there's a discussion area just for teams. So it's private in that only teams can see it. But if you don't want to like comment on an issue or something like that, this is right now a private way for just triagers to communicate. Potentially, we could use that.
I forgot about that, and that's so great.
Yeah, that was great. I didn't know that existed.
Yeah, I've never used it, but I was going to say, yeah, let's just use this. But I actually really do agree with what Wes is saying specifically about creating a public record one, I see 2 things. One, we need to think about onboarding triagers because we've all just been figuring this stuff out as we go, which is all right. But so I'm working a lot personally about trying to document what I'm doing. So I would love to see us do that as a project, as an effort to onboarding triagers. I think that's important. But yeah, my brain just stopped working, so I don't know what else I was going to say. But that discussion thing exists, and I'm more than happy to. I would love to see triagers that give a question or whatever, just posting that or something. I don't think that. I'm not sure if Doug and Wes are part of the triage team, so I'm not sure if they would see that there. But at the very least, you could talk to other ones.
Yeah, so I did see the one when I was mentioned, and I did notice that, because I'm not, that in case for you, Wes, too, if you open it up, there's a link, a button on the left-hand side, and then I did actually just start watching it right now. So now I'm effectively the same as everybody else, as in like getting messages. So that way you don't even have to specifically at me if you don't want to. So
I'm now watching as well. Good point. Yeah,
So,
I did not get in. I think I got a notification also because I'm at mentioned, right? But not to the next. Like John, you posted a reply, and I did not get a notification of that. So that's I think great. Also, we can add ourselves to the triage team as well. Is also another option, but it sounds like watching it's probably the best option.
But yeah, so if everybody so perhaps I guess the next step there would be we can certainly try using that. Otherwise, because I was going to make a private repo just called triage. But if this is able to almost like be the same thing, it's not a whole repo. And as long as the discussions don't get like, however it manages discussions, if we feel like we really don't like it, and we can always make the repo. But this seems like as a good a place of any, because like you pointed out, only the only people who can probably see it are going to be members of that team or owners of the org, which is why me and Wes see it. And that way, it's just a private area to put that kind of stuff. And just like Wes was saying, I just want to reinforce that, right? Is like, yeah, the idea is that over time it's public, but I totally get being, hesitant to, especially at first, to say stuff, or especially if you're like, I feel like I should close this, but like, I'm not sure if I should just close it, and someone will make an issue with that. And so this will give you like the area to build up that confidence, really, is, I feel like, helpful too, right? Because that's what we want you guys to, that's part of like what we want what we want as part of triaging, right? Is you should be able to have confidence to have an informed decision of when you closed an issue, and know that you closed it because you felt like that was the right thing to do. I mean, anybody, even other triagers can decide, oh, well, you know, it needs to be open again. But that's not necessarily like a fault on you for if you really felt like it was closed, and like getting like to that spot where you feel confident that, yes, this can be closed to close it there. Like just today, for example, Ryan was going through the Express.js.com repo. You know, I was glancing at them as they were coming in, and they all, pretty much everyone there me seems perfectly fine. I had no issues with any of what he was doing there. So that's like an example of, you know, I feel like is a good example of this, of success there, because it's like, hey, he took the initiative, just went through, tried to help clean it up, you know, because there's always different stages, right? Just cleaning some stuff up and then actually helping. You have like both of those things, and they're both cleaning ups and sometimes just help you feel it like the repo is less of a mess to then like make more progress on the rest of the stuff. So yeah.
So to maybe loop back just a little bit to the when should we close things? I think now that we have this discussions area, I think a great way would be to just post in there a link and say, hey, like Doug was saying, should we close this? I think we should close this. Do you think we should close this? You know, is I think a really great way. And then to add on to that though, closing it is a very temporary thing. If you think you should close it, close it. Be nice, you know, to the person and say, hey, it looks like this is a duplicate. I'm going to close for now, because again, it's not permanent. All we got to do is go reopen it if somebody, you know, thinks otherwise, and it won't be, it won't look bad on anybody involved to have, you know, closed and reopened or closed even a little preemptively. As long as the user doesn't come back all mad, then we're all, I think, pretty good with the situation. So
yep. And yeah, sometimes closing it with a message like what Wes was saying, like, hey, we think it's a duplicate here. Like many times I've added like, you know, if you provide any more, if there's any more information comes up, we can always reopen the issue. Sometimes I'll just add that to just make it feel like, because I have had people think like closing the issue is closing the conversation down, when it's more like just like there's not really a clear outcome. So like, what's the purpose of keeping it open? It doesn't stop the discussion. Everything in there we still get emails for, and it still can reply. So, but of course we can always reopen it too, when new things come to light too. So like, you know, we have a lot of those where you've probably seen tagged as like awaiting more info, right? It's like, and then maybe you do, or maybe you don't get more info, and then we got to close it at some point at least. But if they ever do provide more info, we in that same ticket, we can always like reopen it, easy peasy. So.
And what I like to do is, so specifically for closing, one, obviously, like you mentioned, being more familiar with the project helps. There are things that I closed in Multer that I came back and reopened because I was like, whoops. But specifically, my pro tip on it is provide a reason. I try to, I don't always, but I try to provide a reason of why I'm closing. So then the person can come back and contest it if they want. Sometimes I'll say, if something changes, we're happy to reopen, et cetera. But at the very least, I try to say closed as resolved, closed as stale, closed as whatever. So I try to give a message, but also the factors are staleness. Some of the issues, hopefully a lot more have been closed, but some of the issues are multiple years old. So that alone is like, if there wasn't a reproducible bug, hey, this is kind of seems dead, I'm going to close this for now, et cetera. Staleness. Some people open things that are not problems with Express. Some people open things which are just specifically asking for help. And my kind of shortcut there is I'll try to help them. But if they open an issue which is like, hey, this is not working, I try to tell them like, well, it's working as intended. Or I try to say, this doesn't seem to be an issue with Express. And I try to help them as best I can. And I'll close just to be like, this isn't an issue with Express. This tracker's for issues. Maybe open something in Stack Overflow. Or resolved. If it's been resolved, sometimes things get left. Those are honestly the big things. Stale, people stop responding after a long time, or it's just not an issue with Express itself specifically. And a lot of times you can only determine if it's an issue if they give you reproduction. I've spent so much time trying to reproduce problems and realize it's just that their client that they wrote is wrong, et cetera. So.
Yeah, that's
I want to
one
say
thing that
close
I would like to.
but
I would like to second quite a bit here. And this is getting a lot better with you all being involved because it was a lot harder before. But one thing I found, and this is just so true across the board, you are not here to serve them. If they don't come with valid information, don't waste a lot of your time on trying to make it perfect for them. This is an open source project. We're all volunteers. We're here to help because we are, find it, the product valuable, enjoy working in open source, et cetera, all the reasons why you might get involved in open source, none of which are like debugging somebody's company web app, right? Like they don't pay you. Don't feel the need to go and do that. It is perfectly valid to say closing for now until you can come with a reproducible test case. Like that is fine, right? You don't need to feel bad about doing that. Even if they get mad at you, that's not your fault. Like you are doing a great job helping the community. And if they have that reaction, that's on them, not on you. Right. So totally feel comfortable not trying to spend time making a reproducible test case and just say, look, we need you to come with a test case here or we will not be doing anything.
I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. And the way I look at it is that triage serves the maintainers of this project. I spend so much time helping people just because I like to, that, I wouldn't have volunteered if I didn't. But at the end of the day, my goal is to cut down the noise so that the maintainers of the project spend less time having to wade through that stuff. Whenever I see Doug go on a tear and close a bunch of issues, I try to pay attention to be like, shit, I should have done that. Like, what is he doing different that he found these issues that can get closed? So, but yeah, that's how I look at it. We're here specifically to help the maintainers, and we end up helping a lot of other people as a result. But the best way to serve the maintainers and the users is to try to service bugs and make the project better. And a big part of that is just saying, sorry, this isn't a problem with Express. And I can't read your code if you don't give me reproduction, so I can't really help you right now.
So on that point, it's getting late, and perhaps in that discussions channel, we should talk about the extra meeting. I think in the current circumstances, almost everyone is working from home and that's probably okay. But I don't know long term in a year's time, but for the foreseeable future, everyone will be working in these type of enclosures and will have more access to more ability to do this sort of thing. So I think perhaps going in that discussion one, and yeah, I'm open to it. I'm not obviously not going to speak for anyone else, but I can do another meeting just on these things.
So just to then we should put a point on this, and I agree. That's a great point to say, like, let's wrap this meeting up. We've gone enough over time. Does somebody want to take the initiative and open a issue that says, should we schedule, and if so, when, a triage deep dive or regular triage meeting? Because again, I think even our TC meetings go over, so I think it was a little misguided to say, oh, we'll combine them, because clearly we have a lot to talk about for an hour-long time slot. So is there anybody who wants to volunteer to take on the scheduling of a triage meeting?
I'll open an issue.
Okay, awesome.
Should I open it in the discussions?
Yes. Wait, the discussions repo, not the private triage discussion area. We're gonna have to come up with terminology to differentiate the two.
Discussions repo, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, I think, is there anybody else with anything else before we go? Doug, I don't know if you had any closing thoughts.
Hey, I apologize. There's extremely severe weather rolled up on us. That's tornado weather, and we're trying to like run and grab everything inside. Sorry, I apologize.
Okay, so perfect time to hop off the call.
Yeah, I'll leave one thing. I tried to add David just now, and it told me that he's not a part of the Express org, so I couldn't add him to the team. So I'll leave a comment on the meeting about that, but we'll have to figure that out. So hold on, David.
if we have to, I'll look at it right after this and see if we have to maybe add you as some other role in the org in general. So. Okay, well, if that's it with everybody, I will go ahead and end the recording. I'll send this over to Doug, and we'll look for another meeting next week and a triage team meeting specifically as well. And to be clear, the triage team meeting doesn't mean, I think it's great to have us all on the TC call as well, because this kind of information, it just broadens our, all of our understanding of what's going on in the project. So hopefully we can continue to have nice big groups like this. So thank you all for all your hard work. So
thank you. Okay. Bye-bye, everyone. Keep well.
Bye.
Bye.